game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One-to-One.
Hello and welcome to One-to-One. Universities are among the most enduring institutions in any society. They shape knowledge, train leadership, and quietly influence the direction of national development. Yet in federally structured systems, their autonomy, funding and governance are often contested terrain. My guest today is Professor Folasade Ogunsola, medical microbiologist, public health scholar, and 13th Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos, the first woman to hold that office in the institution's history. Professor Ogunsola, welcome to One-to-One.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all mine. Prof. Ogunsola, you are, of course, your career spans infection prevention, antimicrobial resistance, hospital epidemiology, and now executive stewardship of one of Nigeria's most systemically important federal universities. You are the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos, are you not?
I am. A real privilege.
I'm sure. But of course, your scientific credibility precedes and underpins your executive authority. You trained originally as a medical microbiologist. But I'd like to know from you, at what point did you begin to see yourself not just as a scientist, but as a builder and a leader of systems?
I would love to say I saw myself. I didn't. Others saw. Because I had a focus. My focus was to stay in academia. I wasn't planning to be part of the governance. Governance, as much as it solved problems, was mine. And I think that's what happened. I started solving problems around things that needed to be done so that our work could be done well. Sure. And I would talk to the people that needed to be talked to. So I guess I started doing it without actually planning for it to go anywhere, just and to solve my problems.
Sure.
So, and part of the problems I had was in doing some research. I was the PI for a randomized placebo-controlled study. And it was during that time we had to get NAFDAC on board because NAFDAC had no rules or guidelines. It was during that time I had to get our IRB, the Institutional Review Board, organized to be able to do such large studies. It was because of that study, where I had 2 clinics in town, had about 15 outposts, and I was accosting people. It was a microbicide study for HIV. Accosting people on the road, I had to organize. Right. But that was not the thing. Part of that was then I had to set up data centers in the hospital and in the university. But that was not the thing that got me the attention, although it was part of it. What got me the attention was when we now wrapped up, I looked at where are the gaps, where are the things we don't have. People sell off things you don't need. I went to the CMD. I have furniture. Would you like it? I have equipment. Can we use it in the hospital? Can we, and people, even in the offices, because I felt I have a firm belief you're not bigger than your institution. So I did those kind of things. I also organized, I got sourced the Central Research Laboratory for HIV. It's still going on till today, which is a reference lab. And so all these I had to set up. I got to understand our finances in the university, and it just pushes you into administration, and that makes your work better. So when I was head of department, we never ran out of things because as soon as we don't have, there isn't enough. So as soon as we get it, we've written the next letter so that my secretary knows how to escalate. And so suddenly I got people coming to meet me. Have you ever thought of being provost? And I said, get away. I have no time for such nonsense, But I had learned how to do things, because in managing my hospital, all these clinics in town and still doing my work, there was a lot of administrative management. Mm-hmm. And so gradually, I then, people kept coming. And then I started thinking about it. And I come from a family that says you can't complain. And then when they ask you to work on it, you say no. Yeah. But two things changed my mind. The first one was that if you refuse to be a part of the solution, then you lose the moral right to criticize or complain.
Absolutely.
The second one was a thought that popped into my head, and I wondered where it came from, because I didn't come from a home where there were gender differences. I thought, that's a man's job. And I thought, what do you mean by a man's job?
You actually thought that?
It came out. I didn't know where it came from, because if you spoke to me, I'm very against that. But it meant it was embedded somewhere. I come from a family where we all had our say, female, male. My father was very clear, you do what you would like to become. He wasn't. And, but I know that the college, everybody had been a provost. And the only woman that had ever come out did not win. It was almost like a gang up. So I don't think I even looked at that direct. Then I always believed that if I went into executive, then it takes away from my scholarship. So I was not really, but when I had those two thoughts, the first one was really about responsibility. The second one was, where did that come from? And then I decided I'm going to do it. I had to fight that thought.
Yes.
And part of that, then I had to interrogate myself. Why did I not want to be provost? One of the things that I realized was we're meant, we're socialized, even though my family was not against it, but I still had some of that socializing to be nice, to be not too pushful. And I remember when my report cards come home and they look at and they'll say, Sade can be argumentative. That's the one they will pick. Sade needs to, that's my teacher saying she has to tone down on her opinions. So I spent time trying to tone down on my opinions.
But that's society foisting its ideals on years.
Yes, they don't do that with the guys. So I guess, and then you don't need to be from the home. You're in the society. So somewhere, some of these things I had gone into my subconscious. So I decided to do it. But I had to ask myself, why didn't I want to be provost? The first one is that when you're in leadership, a lot of nasty things can be said about you. Many may not be true. And we as women, our reputation matters. I don't want anybody to talk rubbish about me. But, I thought about it and I thought, Bill Clinton had or the Monica Lewinsky. Well, for many people, he's still one of the most favorite U.S. presidents. So I thought, well, he survived it, so can I. I just thought of different, I thought, if you do enough good work, there will be balance. And then the last one is, many people who will talk about you don't know you at all. Yes. You will never meet them. Yes. So really, in the course of your life, the people who know you know you. Yes. So I decided to go for it. Yes. But I always have a prayer. I'm also a person of faith. Yes. My prayer to God always, when I take up some of these, I say, Father, if it's mine, we're doing it together. If it's not mine, scatter it. I'll get over it. Nobody likes to lose, but I'll get over it. Absolutely. And I did it. And I think it was a fantastic experience. It strengthened me. I lost some of that fear of my reputation, but I'm very conscious of my reputation. But I recognize that if you're in leadership and you expect everybody to like you, then you're going to you will not do anything. that no matter what you do, there will be people determined to misunderstand your intentions. You can't even explain yourself out of it. And I also learned not to take things too personally. And the last one really, which I think helps me, is that I always try to create a level playing field to be fair and just, and that I don't take decisions lightly. So if I'm convinced that what I'm doing is for the best of the institution, I'll go ahead. I know I will have people against me. There'll always be people against you, even if you just sit down and smile. Some people will hate the idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Professor Ogunsola, we are getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. No, it's really, really nice. You just laid out a wonderful agenda, and it's interesting to come to understand your thoughts and about that strength of character. That says that moral authority is important.
Extreme.
The sense of institutional responsibility, and that comes really from your upbringing, your childhood. Also very interesting, your perceptions or subliminal thoughts about gender equity and you're questioning your own thoughts on that matter. And of course, it's a subject that I would like to explore a bit more later on. But I would like to know, having described and discussed all of this, how did your scientific training change the way, or influence the way one approaches executive decision making? We've described the many opportunities that came to you, but you didn't court them, but you were prepared. You had a certain structure to your thinking. How was that influence affected by your scientific background?
Give me evidence. I need evidence.
Yeah.
I don't. You don't come to tell me things, or I want to understand it. I must have and then if I have information, I want to determine that information. How true is it? And not everything is black and white. So it always comes down to how do you deal with the facts? What's fact? What's fiction? What's somebody's agenda? I mean, you now sit, and then it's always about long-term thinking. Some things look right when you only think in terms of now. I always ask myself, in 5 years' time, how will this be in 10 years' time? So it's always beyond today. So I think can it stand the test of time? And I think that comes from my scientific. I question. I'm not, and then when people work with me, I didn't realize I did that. It's all about the superior argument. If you give me a better argument, I'll take it.
Absolutely.
And I'll say, okay, you're right, we'll go. So it's not about, I must be right. It's that convince me. So if you can convince me, you can't convince me with emotions that it is, and I'll also say, because I'm female, you're our mommy. You can't move anywhere with that statement. I will tell you, yes, I'm your mommy, but here I'm the Vice-Chancellor, or here I'm the Provost, and it's not about mommy, and don't mix rules. I'm very clear. My rules are very clear. So as I might be empathetic, but being empathetic does not mean you go and break the rules, just to make somebody feel good. It's not about emotions. It's about that system. That system must be protected because it works for all of us. So I think I'm very fact-based and evidence-based. And I had not really thought about it till you asked that question, but I'm sure that is part of it. It's really because I have to make those decisions based on truth.
Absolutely. That's institutional maturity right there. I was raised by a lawyer. My father would say, give me the facts. Which I find incredibly annoying as a child, actually. Give me the facts.
And that was my dad. He would say, okay, convince me. And then you're sitting there marshalling your thoughts and trying to, and it was not always, we did not always win.
That's right. It meant you couldn't win an argument simply on the basis of your emotion, which was an interesting lesson growing up. So you've just invited me in this conversation to press in and talk a bit more about institutional autonomy, authority, albeit in your case under constraint, and the many governance tensions that you feel as Vice-Chancellor of a systemically important university like the University of Lagos. So, Professor Ogunsola, you are the 13th Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos. The first woman to hold that office in the institution's 6-decade history. I'd like to know from you, what culture did you inherit institutionally when you assumed that role?
I assumed the role November 2022. That was post-COVID. It was an institution in a country that was already having an economic problem. And our universities had 2 years or so of strikes. The institution I inherited was one of very low morale. Academics felt totally unheard, unappreciated, unseen. And it's not just from government, it's also from the public. People really do not appreciate the effort academics do within a very difficult terrain. I inherited a university that in the last 20 years, we had not increased any fees. Students were paying $25,000 a year for courses, for their whole course, $25,000 in 2022. So many things that we could do, we were no longer doing. Things that were important for knowledge generation. We had the government would give money for capital, but really we weren't getting money for recurrent expenditure. We got salaries that had not changed in 10 years, despite all the inflation in the country. Now, the impact on University of Lagos and a few other universities was higher than, should I say, those in the cities, expensive cities. Lagos is a very expensive place to live. So the universities, the lecturers in the University of Lagos were more pauperized than many in universities outside, So people just did not see why they should continue to work. Then they had stopped salaries, no work, no pay. So there were many people who could not survive. That was the university and it was very clear we needed to move forward. I also inherited a university where every day I got 10 resignations, both from academics and non-academics.
Every day?
Every day, about 10. It was a tsunami of resignations in 2023. The rate at which people were resigning, those who were not resigning outright were asking for leaves of absence and they were disappearing. Those ones were actually resigning but were just hedging their bets. So they take a leave of absence, don't pay us, but give me 2 years, all sorts of reasons. So that was the university I inherited. And it was very clear that if this university was to survive, certain things had to occur. Some were outside my realms of influence. I can't influence salaries. It's paid directly by government. But I can influence what we can spend to improve practicals, to start to improve what we do within the university to ensure that we can show up the work, the business of knowledge generation and knowledge dissemination. I'm sure we didn't do that. I'm a scientist. We sat down. What do we spend? How much do we spend on this? How much do we spend on that? And if we came up with 4 tables, if we're to just marginally improve things, this is how much students have to pay. If we improve it to a certain level, but not quite where we want to go, this is what they'll pay. If we get this amount, and then we have some extra to forecast so that you don't have to change costs every week, this is what we'll pay. If it was really best case scenario, we first threw out best case scenario, we threw out the worst one and then we sent that to the Ministry of Education. I wanted to say this because I think it speaks to the rationale, to the nature of what I inherited. And the ministry looked at it and said, Professor Ogunsola, they will tear you apart. We were coming from 25,000 a year, which broken down means for education, students were paying 2,000 naira a month. And we said they should pay, I think at that time, the lowest would pay like 200,000 a year, which is just over 10,000 a month, if you break it down. And bedlam. Even people wanted to sue us, an NGO from the UK, till we engaged them, and because they didn't really know how much. Everybody was just saying they want to kill them with prices. And then the NGO was going to take us to court. Till we knew someone there who then spoke to them and said, have you really interrogated this? Which is the power of social media. You don't get the full story and you all just go to town. And when he said, you mean that's all they're going to pay? I mean, by the time they moderated, you were talking 100,000 a year. Yeah. Less than 10,000 for the lowest. So that's the culture. And at that time, nobody wanted to do anything. So the culture I got then was a culture of the country doesn't care about us. We don't care about that. If they've taken our money, we can't survive. Our children can't be better than us. So anything they were ready to do, people were just fed up.
So was this really a culture that said, well, education's important, but not that important? Was that the sum total of what that culture was?
I think the culture I got was from within, from outside. It was, we love education. The country values education, but you put your money where your heart is. Clearly, education is not important in this country because we like short-term gains. Yeah. Education is long-term. Sure. Within the university, it had gotten to a stage where it was a case of, if the country doesn't value me, why should I push myself? So we started that, re-engagement. So that was the culture. The culture I got was a very demoralized set of people. Yeah. Of course, in anything that we say, there'll always be people who are self-motivating, even if the world is breaking around them. But in the main, most people were fed up.
Sure. So you're really, as Vice-Chancellor, constantly navigating structural tensions, aren't you? And you've named some of them, but between federal oversight, university autonomy, how autonomous are you as a university, academic freedom, public accountability. Yeah. But in practical terms, how autonomous is a federal university in Nigeria really? Where does federal oversight end and academic independence begin?
Okay, let me start by the Act. The Act is very clear. We are autonomous. That's what the Act is. Of course, when autonomy does not mean, what do you call this? That you do not answer to anybody.
Of course. Yeah.
But to the extent that we decide how we spend our money, because we have a governing council. And that governing council has a chairman, has members of the public that are chosen by the federal government. And then we also have members of the university congregation, from Senate, from the congregation, from convocation. Convocation can include our alumni. And then we have members from the Ministry of Education to also ensure that we're following the laws. Technically, these are the people that form our policies or approve the policies. The Vice-Chancellor is on that committee, the Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellors, and we bring the problems of the university to the committee. They approve our money. Technically, they are supposed to approve who we employ, how we spend the money, where we can save our money. It's approved. And once that approval is done, the Vice-Chancellor goes to do what needs to be done.
Sure.
In the last few years, since the military, all sorts of things have happened. First of all, the appointment of Vice-Chancellors was suddenly taken to Abuja, so you have to go and beg. I've still fought that battle. So now Vice-Chancellors are appointed by the governing council. And it's based on you're not voted for. It's based on there is a criteria that's out that looks at your scholarship and your impact in the past. And so you go through a series of exams. That's one. Recruitment of people should be at council. That's changed. We're still trying to get it back. Really, because when you put too many layers of bureaucracy in employing teachers and lecturers, sometimes you have to employ somebody because they're good and you can find them. You don't have time to wait for some cycle. So now we can't employ, and we have peculiarities. If I don't have enough of a particular type of lecturer, I can get adjuncts. They must be paid. Sometimes now, 2 years, 3 years, we're still waiting for the payment. And these are because of the bureaucratic bottlenecks and other people making decisions beyond us. Mostly because people really don't understand the university system.
So, Professor Ogunsola, I'd like you to spell it out for me. To what extent can that autonomy, albeit constrained, survive under sustained fiscal and political pressure?
It would affect quality, and it would affect quality, and it cannot survive too long. Because once you start, because our system is it's a meritocracy. And I think it's probably the last bastions of meritocracy in the public service. We still fight to hang on to it. In many areas we have it, but some it's slipping. So we can't. Under that kind of, I would say, political assault, inability to do things, and yet you want us to be, competing with the best in the world. Even where it's not going to survive too long.
But of course, medical microbiologist you are, I'd like to ask, if pathogens exploit weak systems, what precisely exploits weak institutions?
I like that. People will exploit weak institutions, and I'll explain. Not always from bad intentions. Once you don't have the institutions, and the institutions are not strong, it means the rule of law, accountability, what can and cannot be done, your justice system, what do you do when someone does wrong? The things, when I use the word people, it's very broad, but I'll say what people use. So that's when emotions come into it, because that's when, and I'll tell you, the greatest ones are those emotions, the ability to get away from not being accountable comes into weak institutions. Religion becomes a major problem. And when I say religion, we use religion to cover a lack of courage to take tough decisions. So you start to forgive a crime that the person is not yet sorry for.
Yeah.
And then forgiveness and accountability are very different. The fact that I've forgiven you, that's a personal thing. The consequences prescribed by the institution must be carried out. No interference. The other thing, apart when I say people, these are all people. So religion, emotions, a bit of our culture, but again, our culture is used to suit us in any situation. Where we don't give voice to the young, and it's under the pretext that I'm not your age mate. What has that got to do with the system? So if you have a young age head of department, if the systems are not strong, he can't get away with it. The big professors can override him unless he's personally strong. So the system must support him. And when you have weak systems, he's not supported. Then interference from outside, the political structures. And the weak systems then mean that the governance of your institution, and I can say that because the universities have an act on how we can be governed. Various governments handle it differently. We are not civil service. We're not governed by the rules of civil service. We're schools. We are institutions of learning, very different from ministries. The same rules don't govern us. Ministries are not supposed to, they're supposed to have oversight, but it's supposed to be at a certain level. There's a lot of intrusion. And that's because we don't have strong systems. So any government can come in and just ignore everything. Different governments handle these differently, but because somehow in the country, we've really not focused on ensuring institutions. Everybody comes in and everybody wants to be powerful. Even as a Vice-Chancellor, you could become a sole administrator if you wanted to in some institutions. What I'll say though is the University of Lagos, we've been lucky in the last few Vice-Chancellors that systems have been put in place. That it's very difficult for me to just wake up and take a decision. Senate has to approve it. Even if I don't want to do that, my colleagues in Senate will take me up. So institutions are strong. It's because human beings, when you're at the top of, and everybody's saying what a wonderful person you are, you might start to believe your own publicity and start to expand and extend powers that you do not have the right to. So politics from outside, politics from inside, and as I said, people. It's the people. We're like the pathogens. Although we make the systems, we put the rules in place and we exploit them, and we use certain mechanisms: emotions, religion, politics, mainly. And the religion one is really about, you have to be kind to you. If you know, and then the other part of accountability is everybody saying it's not me. Yes. Let it not be said that I reported a crime. And I tell people there's no halfway. If you do not report the crime, you've taken the position that you prefer to shield the perpetrator and you are against the victim. There's just no two ways about it. There's no middle ground in justice. So when I say that, that's what I mean.
Absolutely. So this really is about, the accountability we speak of. It's really about institutional responsibility, maturity, the roles and responsibilities. And
they have to be clearly spelled out, and then they must be pursued. There must be, when people break the rules, then they must face the consequences. And I have found that when people bend rules for people, those people are not grateful. Please do not believe it. They tend to give you the greatest problem because they don't appreciate what went into bending to get them. So they just think they've been smart. So I found that the most ungrateful, most problematic people are people who have gotten things from a system that should not have given them.
Absolutely. And institution making is a formative exercise, isn't it? The actors are learning
All
good
the
behavior,
time.
bad behavior all of the time.
Yes, and if you keep
Maybe not.
allowing rubbish to happen, the good people start to wonder, why am I bothering? So soon you have an epidemic of bad behavior.
Correct. So speaking about competing with the best in the world, of course, funding volatility is a recurring issue, isn't it? But kind of, as an understatement, can a university maintain academic excellence without financial predictability, really, in your
Okay, well, let me say a little bit. Now, anything I say is University of Lagos.
Of course.
Under the chairmanship of Gamaliel Onosode. Oh no, let me go back a little bit. Government recognized a long time ago that funding the universities will be a problem. In any country, actually, once you massify the university education, it can no longer be free. And I think till we recognize that, when we're going to be, it can never be free again. There was a time university education was free in the UK. It changed. Once you're having universities all over the place, no government can deal with that. So they asked, at that time it was decided that we should have internally generated revenue. And the idea of that was that the internally generated revenue will augment government's expenditure. But what happened? Government expenditure kept going lower, was getting smaller and smaller. The expenditure, IGR, was what we were generating, and which then became what ran the universities. Now, when you go anywhere in the world, a lot of what you use to run the university are the fees. But we're not allowed to charge fees. We actually do not charge tuition. What we charge now are for services, and it's just a small part of it. So we don't pay tuition. So government, but the balance is government pays salaries. But for government to pay salaries that will be commensurate to other universities, we don't have to go abroad, even in West Africa. It will be a huge amount because we're many. Universities are a lot. We're about 300 universities for federal, we're about 60, I think it's now like 73. To pay all those people is a huge sum. So we don't have tuition for financial, because I've studied this across everywhere. So if you're not paying tuition and you're just having these ones for the services, you have a challenge. But we were lucky in many ways. Under Gamaliel Onosode, he made University of Lagos start thinking more business-like.
Yeah.
So we set up endowment funds. We looked at lectures and certificate programs that you can charge for and make sure that they're good. So we set up the postgraduates you pay, but even then it's not really commercial, but it's certainly better than undergrad. And so we put money aside for some things, but we're not where we should be. But the other part of it is that then we reached out to industry. Now, if I don't have money, but you give me a building, that's money. If I don't have money and you do this for me, and our location helps. It's still not the best, but the way things are going, and then we've invested heavily in IT. So we also leverage things online. So yes, the money is not enough, certainly. I mean, if I had money, I will totally rejuvenate all our buildings and make them modern. But But it's not as bad as people think by looking at our infrastructure.
Of course. So, Prof. Ogunsola, of course, funding volatility is an issue, and we will come back to that in this conversation quite happily. Actually, but I'd like us to step away from that just for a bit and talk about, stay on the subject of autonomy. I'd like to understand from you how you balance academic unions, student pressures, and federal directives, as well as public scrutiny, by the way, all at once in your position as Vice-Chancellor.
Ooh. I think I will say that there are two things, and which I've tried to cultivate: transparency, in other words, not having a hidden agenda. And I think that's come through, and communication. I'm speaking about myself and the unions. I try to ensure that we can have communication. I realize when you have information gaps, speculation follows. That's not to say you will not have disagreements, but I do believe that somehow it's been communicated both to the students and to the unions, and I certainly am not against them, and I really am not. I actually believe that they are a necessary pressure group, or pressure groups that we have in that way. Whether I always agree on their topics is another matter, but we're open to talking. And so they know that I will, and that I will. I think they do know that that's I give room for them to talk, and I give room for us to disagree. And then I'm not much of a politician. If I'm not going to do it, I say quite upfront, I'm not. Yeah. So I don't play games, which may or may not work but somehow it has worked. Because I think at the end of the day, if you can build trust, that doesn't mean you won't have disagreements, but general trust that we mean well and we're not, and your actions match your words. You will by and large should be okay, because the unions want things to be okay for their members. If I want things to be okay for my members, which are all the unions inclusive, if we can come together to recognize that we may be coming from different angles, or you mean well, it has worked so far, touch wood, because some things we will disagree with. But that has worked. And I remember when I was provost, just to say that this has been how I have handled union cases. I got things from the union saying that they were happy with me. That's not to say we didn't have problems.
High praise indeed.
High praise, yes. I turned to the person coming and saying, "Don't think that you will get away with it." But we had, and there were strikes, but they were not about me. And so I think communication, for them to recognize that you don't have a hidden agenda, straight talking, will get you through most of the things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Absolutely. So having a dignified agenda, communication, mutual respect, really, really important.
It helps.
Yeah. So I'm going to pivot to who you are and your personality here, Professor Ogunsola. And I'd like to ask, does the symbolism of being the first female Vice-Chancellor have operational implications at all, or is leadership ultimately gender agnostic in practice? In other words, are there expectations of you that perhaps would normally not exist if a male VC were in place?
Leadership is not gender agnostic. There is a tendency to believe that a female leader should be soft and gentle, because that's the persona that they expect of women, and should be a mommy or an auntie or a sister, in a way that is designed to say you should be soft on consequences. And when they don't get that, the pushback is harder.
Yes.
I had a number of experiences as provost, much more than as vice-chancellor. Oh, one more thing. As a female, you find that coming from the male gender, even those who are well-meaning, they're trying to protect you from information you should have. We just thought we would help you to. I'm not asking for help. So I've had to, even from people who are my friends, to say, this is my job. There's no information that's too difficult. Otherwise I won't be here. Yes. But keeping it from me is setting me up for failure. Because whether you keep it from me or you don't, when the problem happens, it's going to be the vice-chancellor. So I like to know upfront. So you find information flow to a female can be a little less. Men talk to themselves. Many are not comfortable with the female.
Yes.
So certain things they would have told their friends or their male, or they say in their club, you don't get to hear till later.
Absolutely. So let's break that down structurally, and then let's codify it a little bit. And lean on our earlier example of your communication with the unions and all of that. Yeah. And I'd like you to hold in your head as well previous examples of how communication patterns have gone. Would you say that your experience as a woman growing up through the system in academia has perhaps better equipped you to communicate effectively?
Definitely. And I don't think it's just going through academia. Being married, dealing with in-laws, navigating the Nigerian space. I think women get to read people. You know, even though I said information doesn't come, you read situations a bit more, you know, you can feel the tension. You may not know what exactly. But certainly listening to people, you're picking up cues, definitely. And I think some of the things that that shaped how I governed had to do with going through the system and recognizing that as a female, we're less likely to push ourselves forward. So I go looking for the women. They will be very efficient, but they will not move forward. So you have to look for them, you know. And when you've put them out there, they tend to perform, you know. So yes, certainly how I came up through the system. And I mean, I am a prime example. To be honest, if you look at my antecedents, I should have just gone forward and said, I would like to be. I mean, I'd been governing, but a guy would look at that, or a man would. I didn't even think of it as part of my experience. I'm not even sure I would have put it in my CV. It was just not on my consciousness. And we tend to do that. We minimize ourselves quite a bit. So, yes.
So leading into that a little bit more, and the fact that you're having to go looking for women to participate, would you say that women are underrepresented in high-level academia in Nigeria, across Africa?
Totally. Of the 73 vice-chancellors in Nigeria, I think only about 11 or 12 are women. In fact, not 73. The total number, 300, maybe 10%. I'm not even sure we're up to 10%. And most of those are in the private universities. Of the top 5 universities in Nigeria, that's the oldest, UNN Ibadan, Lagos Ife, and ABU. I'm the only woman.
Right. Okay.
And I don't see any woman anywhere in the offing.
A very telling statistic indeed. So universities are meant to be spaces of free thought, nothing else. So how do you protect that intellectual independence within the politically sensitive environment?
I'm going to say between not just a politically sensitive, but a culturally sensitive. I've been thinking about it. Which is worse? Is it the culture or the politics? They feed off each other. Because we have an age, actually the Yorubas.
Yeah, it's a gerontology, so gerontocracy.
Yes. So and we take that into the workplace. If somebody has spoken, who am I to speak?
You're talking to a last-born child.
So it's a major problem, and people self-censor. So you don't even have to, so you have to encourage it. Now, are there many of us encouraging it? I'm not sure. So it is a problem. I actually think it's a problem. So we're now, but I'll say something. There's a shift happening, generational. The younger faculty are a little bit now, a bit more vocal.
Yeah, less differential.
Less differential. The students, when I was in school, if I saw my Vice-Chancellor, I would just freeze into one corner. The students that would come, Ma, can we take a picture with you? Before you know it, I'm doing selfies. But the interesting thing, the number of people say, Ma, you should not be taking picture because it's considered a bit rude and forward. I understand that. Sometimes you do have to put the brakes, but you can see that sooner or later, I think some things time will work them out. But as institutions, is to ensure that when young people have issues, we handle them. But it will be difficult to go into every nook and cranny, So one of the things I've done, which is gender, but actually not that. I had a conversation. I invited all the lecturer twos and lecturers to a meeting. I got some people saying, why is she inviting the young people? I said, they're my staff. Just to talk to them, because I believe they don't even feel heard or seen, to ask what they were doing, what challenges they had, and just to get to see them, where is their research area. Then more recently, I had a meeting with the females, young females, actually took them out for us to talk a little bit about leadership and for them to step up. Part of that is really because I need people to step up. You can't go and give a position to somebody who is not available, So politics, yes, it's challenging. That's within us, but the culture, I think, feeds that politics a lot. And even where it's not the Yoruba culture, I think all our cultures have a bit of that ageism. If it's not ageism, it is I have made it, and then everybody else who have. So if you're a professor, you're a king.
We're very hierarchical.
Very hierarchical, And I think I was helped by the fact that my father didn't encourage too much hierarchy. He loved us to talk. Sure. So when I was a younger lecturer and I had complained, the professor would say something, I said, no, he said, are you a Russian? He used to call me, we're friends now. But for him, it was this young girl that just opens her mouth and speaks. I was never rude, but so I think we need to encourage more of that. But how to do it, I have to tell you, I'm not totally sure. I'm just sort of trying different things and encouraging them to speak.
Of course. And of course, we've touched on your father a number of times in this conversation. Of course, Professor Mabugunje, your illustrious father, emeritus professor of geography.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yes. So I'd like to understand from you what's the most misunderstood aspect of leading a federal university from where you sit?
I don't know if it's the most. We have many misunderstandings, but things that are misunderstood. Can I say two rather than once? Good. One, I think people overestimate how much we have to work with. Even people who say, oh, there's no money, then they go on to complain about things that clearly require money. And the second one is to underestimate the amount of structure and change going on and the last one, so I'll say three, for the leadership, is the amount of political pressure. I don't know if it's underestimated or overestimated. Or should I say I think people overestimate what the Vice-Chancellor can do on his or her own.
Okay.
I mean, even people within the university, they'll say, only the Vice-Chancellor can do it. And I said, how? I need Senate permission. I need Governing Council permission. So there is a structure that holds you. I mean, of course, anybody can flout anything, but that's at your peril.
Yeah.
So I think they overestimate the power of the Vice-Chancellor. We work within a structure. Now, I do not know if that's the same for new universities or private universities, but in a public, at least the old public universities, and many of the new ones are being built. They're using the same laws and guidelines. The Vice-Chancellor is not a sole administrator, of course, certainly not. But people assume that just coming to the Vice-Chancellor, everything will be done.
I mean, if your autonomy is conditional or constrained, actually, I think we agree, how does one preserve institutional dignity? In other words, when you cannot control the environment, funding, politics, how do you control the culture? I'm talking about your academic credibility, decision-making coherence, moral authority, things like that.
Let me say certain things have remained the same. And what I mean by remained the same is the autonomy. The university works on committee systems. Within the university, the way we do things in terms of academic excellence and so on have not really, by and large, been affected. What we have the challenges with will be numbers of staff. Maybe we don't have enough of something. But where the changes and the problems are, okay, let me back. Largely, those are preserved in terms of our autonomy. There could be some political incursions. I want to help me to admit somebody, help me to put somebody somewhere. But those are not major issues, except the Vice-Chancellor doesn't know what he's doing. Because even for admissions, there is a place for discretion. And then if you follow the rules, not everybody they bring to you can you admit.
Absolutely.
So that I think is global. It's not just here.
Yeah.
And it's only a small percentage. So what we try to do, where I'm going is, for most parts, we've maintained quite a bit of that. Again, I talk about University of Lagos, but I think I can speak for some of the big ones and quite in all of our universities. I can't speak for all. The greatest challenges have been areas of who's in leadership, how do you do certain things that are involved with money, spending, and so on? Or how do we prevent politics from, it's more at the level of the governance rather than at the level of the scholarship. But if this goes on, the governance part goes on long enough, it will affect the scholarship, but it has not got there yet. And I think where we have a greatest challenge for us, where it can affect it, is if we don't get the right kind of people coming in or applying because of the salaries. So if you want good people, you've got to pay them well. So where we have the challenge then is financial at that level. Again, I'm not speaking for every university. but I'm speaking for some. In other places, that might have been crushed totally. You know, the autonomy, because he who pays the piper dictates the tune. I would say, beyond sort of, I won't use the word toxic, but benign neglect, what had happened was sort of we were neglected, and we were not paid, and but in many ways it just left us to do what we wanted to do. But when it came to things that how we can recruit, we were not allowed to, which again will affect the quality and the numbers we have. How we can set our salaries, we could not, you know, and so it affects but they don't really come in to deal with the mechanisms. Maybe that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, so you were left to your own devices, but still constrained to the things that matter.
Yes, financial. But we found ways around that. Sure. But it can be pretty painful.
Yes.
And as I say every day, one trouble. That's the nature. I think the other thing people underestimate is how much of a thankless job VCs work hard. My VC, the amount of work that you do just to have the semblance of normality is unbelievable. The pressures on a vice-chancellor is a lot. For many of us, by the time you've done 4 years, you're just counting days. Let me get away from it. And if things are not done well, or some things are not done to ease the pressures, we may start to have many people not wanting to go in to be vice-chancellor.
Yeah. And you've been vice-chancellor now since 2022. That's 4 years and counting. So I'd like to ask you, and we spoke earlier in the conversation about what you're doing with endowments, philanthropy. We don't really have an endowment culture. And we've now spoken about the need to ensure that universities are within proximity of capital markets and industry and business. And that's part of how you are going to encourage the research activity and the funding of that research. So would you recommend that this sort of thinking be baked in as a reform agenda, actually, in education in this country?
Yes, but it's already there. A lot of people say, oh, you don't talk to your alumni. And I say, it's a growth. There was a time universities didn't worry about alumni because we were funded. But it's been going on for at least for many universities, in the last 20 years. There's been an upsurge of alumni, working with your alumni to give back. But I want us to remember our age. We're talking about universities that are 500 years old, 600, and we're 60.
Absolutely.
So it means the percentage of our alumni that even have the capacity to give anything serious is lower. But secondly, it also means that for us in the last few years, you could say we should, a little bit but it also means you have to create the system to know how to get your alumni. You have to create the manpower, because it is not enough to want it. It is actually a skill. Many of our universities are just beginning to develop the skill. Then people say, oh, you didn't reach us. For many of us, we don't even know how to, because it was about paper. These are people whose addresses are on paper. We don't have an idea. Technology has so gone. There are people on paper. We can't reach them. But in many cases, classes, we've been encouraging class sets to contact themselves because they know where each other, and then we're building on that. Now, why am I going to all that? Because many people just say, you should get your alumni, your endowment. That's one. So we have started. We're not perfect yet, but we're growing. And I also want to say, because it's important, that the present Minister of Education has also seen that as something that he needs to support. And there is Vice-Chancellors were invited to a workshop, sort of, where we had public sector and we had some organizations, I've forgotten the name now, who were going to work with us on how to leverage that. Many of us already had endowment funds. And to be fair, people do put it in. But again, it's not just about us. It's also about the culture of giving in the society. Not just the individual, but how do we incentivize industry to give? In places like the US, you will get a tax rebate and things that happen when you give to our but I think it's a little bit more than that for us. There has been culturally or traditionally, we have a history of mistrust between the private sector and the public sector. But I think all of us have to start thinking Nigeria. Yes, there's mistrust, but it's not that nothing is working. Why do engage before you condemn? That's what I say. Meet with universities you're comfortable with. Start small. You could start, and you can ring fence it. And really, for example, with us, we have the advancement board, and we have those who would manage the money. They're a mix of private sector. And so there are many ways you could even come in to talk to how, I mean the private sector, how we can do it in a way that makes you comfortable, but also gives us access.
Yes.
So I think this hands-off approach does not help Nigeria. We all need to come together because this country, we can't keep farming our children out. And the out is becoming a lot more hostile.
Yes.
And I think what is happening, and in many ways I like it, is like what happened during COVID. We all inherited the healthcare system we built, and we neglected. I hope we're not going to, I think we should learn from that and make sure that we're building the education systems. And let me also say, the questions we need to ask and research to solve our problems. We don't need to be doing what they did in America. We need to solve our problems here. And I'm not even sure that some of the things that they did are things we want to do.
Correct.
Because see the state of the earth, and the contamination. We've got a chance to do it in a different way, to be more planet friendly. So it might not look as technologically techy, but again, maybe we have the largest arable land, we still have lots of clean air. Maybe we shouldn't be going the way they did and be looking at how we use our indigenous knowledge, and we may not need some of the equipment they need to get to some places, where we need to come to. I don't know, but we need to start interrogating those things.
Absolutely. Research must answer to the questions, so what and who cares?
Exactly.
It must be contextualized.
And it must be, must we follow what they've done? Because really, it's so clear that even food security, they've created food that is not food and is causing inflammation. So do we really want to go that way?
Absolutely.
Must we?
Absolutely.
And I think
absolutely. That's precisely the kind of thinking that is required.
Yeah.
So, Professor Ogunsola, I'm going to paraphrase a quote.
Yes.
So, UNILAG has been supporting innovation and early stage startups through initiatives such as Innovation to Market, the I2M program.
Yes.
It suggests a shift from knowledge production to value creation.
Yes.
So here's my question on that. So is value creation now part of UNILAG's institutional strategy, or is it still peripheral to its academic mission?
It's a major part of our mission. And being involved in the innovation to market is because it's one of the things we want to do, so we attract it. We attract those kind of grants. We actually look for them because we need funding. But more importantly is that we have created support systems on campus. So we have a lot of innovation hubs on the campus. We do hackathons. We have a problem, we throw it out, so students pitch. We have the entrepreneurship and innovation, and the incubation business center, the entrepreneurship center and skills development center. We have innovation hub for creatives on how to turn what you do to business and to value. We interact with industry. We actually go seeking, and we are at the stage where we're now saying even undergrads must go to find out problems and use to solve in your research projects, and especially in engineering and those kind of sources. We have within we have labs that can fabricate and so on. So they're there, and we encourage our students irrespective of their faculty. So yes, it is a major part of our mission, and it has given us dividends. We've increased the number of patents that have come out of our university. We have supported in the last 5 years at least for 50 startups, at least from our university, not to talk of the ones. And then a number of our students, having left, have gone on to develop value. For example, and some of them have developed, of course, there's a lot around fintech as well, but they're also developing drones. There was a group of young people who developed a drone, something in the defense industry, but they were paid for by the US at the end of the day, the venture. But it started on campus. Right. So yes, it's not peripheral. In fact, being in that I2M is because that's who we are. And about 3 years ago, Forbes said University of Lagos was the most entrepreneurial university in Africa.
Right.
Well, the third most entrepreneurial.
In Africa.
In Africa.
Great. So step back for me and walk me through what it takes really for a Nigerian university to institutionalize that sort of research-driven, venture-backed startup program at scale.
First of all, you've got to get all the infrastructure that needs to be put in place. You need to have your research management office. You need to have your innovation and transfer management office, because it's one thing to have the research. It's another thing for it to be translated to value. So somebody must track it. Then it also means that within we work from the thought of constraints. Within our international collaborations, we are very focused on engineering, tech, and so on. So that when we have relationships, we're looking at people who can work with us to improve our ability to do this. Then, in our strategic partnerships, who are the people we are partnering with? We're partnering with people that can give us problems to solve. So one of the things we first started was to have a relationship with small and medium enterprises. They have issues, a machine that cannot be built, a problem they want and they need a solution. And we've positioned ourselves to be able to do that. Are we where we need to be? No, not yet, but we started. Then you must, I'll come back to that. Because we've done that, even in our international relationships, we're known for for doing this kind of vision, I think. So we've got a lot of international support in putting up the kind of infrastructure that would drive value addition. Finally, a percentage of our IGR goes to developing startups, research.
What percentage?
Don't let me say percentage. We put aside each year, and we've grown it. I think this year we put aside about 600 million or about 600 million, if I'm right, for research and startups, of our IGR.
So let's move on now to a not entirely different matter, related. The question of the global standing of African universities. African universities engage the global academy. There's no doubt about that. The question is, how should African universities engage? Actually, I'd like you to start from telling me where we are now. Are we engaging really as partners, competitors, or protégés? And then go on to how you think
I think we're moving slowly from protégés to partners.
Right. So we're currently operating as protégés, mainly.
Mainly, but I think it's changing. And I think the change is coming from two sides. From our side, because we're beginning to be more confident and recognizing that we bring something to the table, which we do, and that and recognizing that people who come are not coming to help. It's because they also have something to gain. And we're beginning to recognize our worth.
Yes.
In terms of rankings, no, we're not at the highest level, because part of that also, there's politics in that. And when I use the word politics, I don't mean it in the sort of easy transactional, but when the rankings are based on what's available in a certain section, it's going to disenfranchise those that have, a lot of things have to do with funding. You fund, you look at the research dollars. We can't have that in Africa. You look at the environment. We're not going to make that. You look at teacher to student ratio. Ours is way over we can't even afford to be doing the 5 to, so whether that necessarily translates to saying what you learn is worse or not is another matter. It's a surrogate. And there are many universities now that are saying that rankings don't work and are not a good. But for those of us in Africa, I still think we should, because it will help to pull us up, to achieve a lot more. There's an external thing there that is difficult, but you can.
Of course.
But the other part of it is that you do pay for these rankings, and the cost is prohibitive. So for many African universities, they won't get ranked, not because they're bad, but because they don't have the funding. You have to decide to put, to spend money for that ranking. And you're looking at it, should I spend it on the new equipment or should I do it to be ranked? But the beauty of the ranking is that it forces you to put things in place. So I think it's worth it for us now. Whether it will be worth it forever is another thing. The second one is for us to have regional rankings and to make sure certain things are in place. At the present times, South Africa universities have the highest rankings. Part of that also is the long traditions they've had and the financials. Many of us don't charge, so there are a lot of, but we've now found that for all of us, there are more gems in our universities than you would know from the rankings. But when you take everything in totality, it affects our ranking. The other thing that affects our ranking is ICT. For you to have all that information ready, it means your ICT must be robust. You must have an EM, your management systems must be running. Many of the universities are manual. Yes. So when you say, oh my God, we have done it, where is it? There's a small window. We at University of Lagos are currently going through a digital transformation. Yes. So that we hope that maybe in the next year, late next year, everything will be at our fingertips. Yeah. But not everybody is there.
Yes, of course.
And then electricity is also an issue.
Yeah, of course. So Prof, Nigeria, as much of Africa, has expanded access to higher education quite a lot Nigeria produces a large number of graduates every year. You spoke about massification earlier on, but is it really just about scale, or is there an issue with quality and other things we should be concerned about?
There is scale. Quality could be better, but it's not as bad as people think. For undergrad, generally okay. I think where we need to do more is postgrad. And when I say that, undergrads, what you want them to understand their concepts and for them to have an open mind, critical thinking, and so on. Where we need to work more is how do you make sure they have the skills for the 21st century in terms of critical thinking and so on. That's one. Two, do we really need for every student to go through university? That's another question. It's either yes and no. Every student doesn't have to go to a university in the sense of what universities are, a lot of abstract thinking and producing people of thought and so on, because there are many skills that you need for development. Universities are there for development. So you should have polytechnics where those who are really skilled at translating thoughts to action, and translating and building things, are. But we have a problem with stigma. So we should turn them to universities, although I don't like that word, but we can then have a nuanced university. Because when you say university, those who go out of universities are paid better than those who are not. Then if you didn't go to university, as a society, we look down on you. And then if you were to be employed in the federal government, into the government, you're paid at a lower scale. So really, why should anybody go to the polytechnics? But we need them. Yeah. And it's a tertiary form of education. So I like what they did in Finland. Yes. They turned it into the University of Applied Science, so that if you go to polytechnics, you go to a University of Applied Science. The only difference is there's more of the polytechnic kind things, but you can get up to a master's. They don't do PhDs there, which is all about research and all that. So if you want, but they also say no dead end in education. So if you go to a University of Applied Science, you can then move on to university if you so wish. But if you want to go into business and other things, you don't need more than that master's. And so in Nigeria, they would have University of Education, which we now have, but they should also be very practical oriented as well as creating new knowledge. But so if we can do that, and if that's how we change all these polytechnics to universities with those nuances, that's not a bad idea. And then make sure that the reward system is the same, because we need those who are good with their hands. Because again, that's a kind of IQ. So we should not just disdain it. And what we have presently is what we were left with, the colonial masters, how to do and how to think. Should I say how to know? You know, but how do you do? How do you solve problems? So we've got that. So the other part of it, and I can say we don't have a problem with knowledge. We know. The universities produce plenty of people who know. Where we have the problem is how do you translate that? And how do you think through problems and apply? And that are skills that have become very important now. So it means, and you can't do that by giving a lecture on critical thinking or how to analysis. You have to make sure they do it. So the way the classroom is formed is different. It's about putting cases, going out to do internships, which we were doing, but we may not have done as well, and which many of us now recognize how important, because that's where they put all those concepts together and have to analyze problems. So we're more about how do you train faculty to be able to pass knowledge in a way that the student has to think about it and analyze so case scenarios, case studies and group work where you give them assignments and they have to think through a problem. So you reduce talking and they go learn by doing or by analyzing. That's what develops the mind. Because the problems we've had, there are two things. The problems we've had has been around that. People say, oh, they don't have initiative. They wait to be told. They can't analyze. Sometimes they can. We've also had a cultural problem. And I think we've also had a class problem. For a long time, upper middle class and so on didn't come to universities in Nigeria. Some of them are coming back now. The cost outside is killing. And the children are coming from the village. They may be smart, but they don't have the social graces. So even when they know, they're not going to speak. So if they come for an interview in a shiny private sector space, and you ask a question, they're already intimidated by that. So the confidence level. But if you leave them, they solve problems that that they feel is part of them. But so we now have to recognize that they're coming from backgrounds where what they were familiar with are not what they will meet.
Sure.
So we have to incorporate it into our work. And to do that, we have to retrain our lecturers to be able to train, not because they're not smart, but because technically all over the world for a long time, nobody taught you how to train. In Western world, they had moved on, but we were holding on to old curricula. So we're there now. And so we recognize the need to retrain our lecturers on how to teach. It's not enough to be a brilliant scientist. But how do you pass that knowledge on? How do you ensure learning occurs? And also to shift our minds from I'm teaching to the question is, are we teaching or are they learning? And what are they learning? So once we do that, and we're beginning to, all these things take time. You start the process. It's already happening. And we're seeing more of that.
Absolutely.
It will happen.
Absolutely. And of course, students have different learning
styles, yes.
As well. And the question of how do you think through problems, by the way, is a serious workplace problem.
It is.
It certainly is. But I'd like to lean on that, to ask further. This massive increase in scale must be putting a strain on infrastructure.
Oh, don't say it. Yes. On all fronts. It's putting a strain on infrastructure. It's putting a strain on the people, the lecturers. And that's why I said, our rules say 1 to 5, 1 lecturer to 5, or 1 to 10, depending on the discipline. In the medical disciplines, there's 1 to 5. Do we have that now? No. Not only in terms of the fact that people have disappeared. And then when you have government expanding without looking at who's going to train.
Sure.
Yeah, it's putting a huge strain. And then when you then have students coming in, you cannot house everybody. In a place like Lagos, where every accommodation is very expensive outside, squatting occurs. We don't encourage it because that's overcrowding. But it can't be totally stopped for as long as we have all our challenges. So it means hostels, the pressure on all the things you use, both in the hostels and in the classrooms, is a lot. Sometimes you just feel as though a tsunami went through and destroyed things you repaired. But that pressure can only be eased as we improve the funding so that we can do the things that we need to do with those funding.
Absolutely.
And I believe that we should actually, some of the universities, the new universities that were set up, some need to be merged so that rather than have many people doing admin in each of these universities, you have more scholars and they're doing other, you divide them and help to reduce the effect of the pressure reduce the pressure, really, because for every university, you need a complement of so many things. We don't have them in the country. Cost an arm and a leg.
And that's a very, very interesting, very practical thought. The Federation of Universities.
Which happens in the US, like the University of Texas group, although it's a bit the same thing. But
absolutely. Yeah. But I'm interested, again, still on that point. Of course, universities are responsible for both disseminating knowledge as well as creating it, generating knowledge.
Our most important task is the creation.
Absolutely. You cannot give what you do not have or what you haven't baked. Thinking about this scale and its impact on infrastructure, what's that doing to research intensity?
It's affecting it. And I've thought through this. Our greatest challenge is research. I've said postgraduate, because knowledge generation requires, amongst other things, time to think. You cannot solve a problem when you're working from morning till night and have no time to think. And that's why you have, when we say one lecturer to so many students, part of it is that lecturers must have time when they can, their brain is just going round and round thinking about what the problems are and how to solve them. And it also means this massification without the commensurate funding. Means equipment that we require. We can't even bring in the kind of manpower because, that's why universities are exchanging lecturers. You have postdocs coming in. They have to be paid. Sure. All these are not for administrative purposes. They're for knowledge generation. Our infrastructure for knowledge generation is still inadequate. And so, how do we do that? One of the things we could do is really to decide that some universities are more for training of manpower and a few more are research intensive, so that they do less teaching, they will have less undergraduates. And so my thought is really that some of the older universities, now that we have so many universities, can move from bringing in so many undergrads and do more postgrad work so that the lecturers are more focused. You can't, Lagos alone now has like 11 universities. UNILAG could really step back, and maybe LASU, and be more research intensive and forget. They will never forget. You'll always do some undergrad. But rather than tell us to be bringing in 12,000 undergrad, let that be for the other newer universities, because really what you need to train undergrads on, you don't need the massive expertise. Yes. But for postgrad, you need expertise, and you need a different cadre of people to make what we need to do happen. So definitely in terms of quality of research, it has affected it. So people have gone around it because you'll see some of our lecturers have really, but it's almost like personal effort. The government supports through TED Fund research grants, but the grant is only as good as the mind that can think. And many people are just tired, or they neglect some parts of their work to do some things, So I think there is definitely the postgrad, of course, is impacted.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me turn to something quite real. UNILAG recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the University of Birmingham to explore UK-validated degree programs to be delivered here in Lagos.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask you, Prof, is this primarily a bridge towards global competitiveness, or is it part of a longer strategy to strengthen UNILAG's own validation authority long term?
Both.
Okay.
And there's also the social aspect. One of the things that MOU is that, and it's not the first one we signed, we also have with Dundee in LLM, is to improve the strength, as you said, of our own courses with universities that are higher up in the ranking, as well as have them here on our soil. So you don't have to travel. But we know that because our lecturers will also teach and these courses are validated, it raises the quality of ours as well. So part of that, what happens is we map and then we find where we're deficient, we add that. So it's part of that. And on the long run, it's like we want to accelerate the improvements in our or should I say the international validation of our courses.
But does this actually move the needle in terms of research output, funding partnerships?
Oh, I'll tell you, we're doing
Faculty development.
We're doing postgrad, and our lecturers will be part of this. Mm-hmm. They're going to be part of the train. One of the things we looked at is where do we need for the national development an acceleration, engineering. So engineering is part of what we'll be doing. In the tech space. Part of that is that then we're going to have equipment, we're going to have improved training or gap filling, if you want to say that. We'll be exposed because we are going to do it to the standards that they have done it. Our own lecturers they'll be part of this training. I mean, what I mean is the course. We're running the courses together, sure, and they'll be here. Sure. So over a period of time, we're not stupid. We're going to see that the areas of, how things are done. You're going to incorporate some of that into yours. There are some you will look at and say, we're doing it better, which we could be. But the areas we're hoping that this will improve or fast track some of the areas of deficiency where we don't have the capacity. Sure. That's part of what we're looking at.
Sure. So let me ask the question this way.
Okay.
10 years from now, would you want UNILAG to still be seeking validation from UK, US universities, or would you like your institution to be the university that others seek validation from?
Of course. There are two things. What we're hoping, now I understand what you're asking. 10 years from now, I want UNILAG to not need anybody's validation. But we also have a challenge, and we may not need it then, that a lot of our people want to travel out. Where part of it is the transnational agenda of the government, is that if things work out, we could have a Birmingham here, a small campus of Birmingham here on our soil. To satisfy, not about our validation, people who want to travel. There are parents who will still want children to have UK degrees. We can't stop people, but save them from having to travel. And so there are those who will. But what I hope is that by then, that might not be needed. But I don't know how it's going to play out because we're doing two things. That UNILAG improves to a stage where it's not about we must go to Birmingham University, but we're coming to UNILAG. And I believe that's where we will be. But we will always have those who would like a University of Birmingham degree, which is fine. We can be friends. They are our strategic partners. Yes. And so they can have a campus here, which will not necessarily be detracting from ours. But a lot of that will depend on how we handle this partnership. And that's what we're planning to do. The idea is that Unilag will get to a stage where you don't have to, like when we were young, you didn't need to go abroad. When you're here in Unilag, I think it will happen, but how soon that will happen will depend a lot on the environment and the political climate and future vice presidents. I'll be gone by God. But that's where we're working to, because the hope that I have is we put some of these foundations in place. The what do you call it? The relationship is not so much for validation forever. It's to help us accelerate our growth. And then, but we're doing a lot already on our own. So I expect that in the next 10 years, it will not be Unilag needing the validation. No, it's not that. Even now, we're not needing the validation, but we recognize areas we could do better. And that's why it's at postgraduate, not at undergrad. We're fine. At postgraduate, there are areas that are moving very fast. And with our funding and so on, we can't catch up very quickly. So these kind of relationships help us. And once we're there, I can assure you, because that's why it's not them coming to teach. They'll come, but we'll be here on the ground. Sure. The skills will be already there that even our own society will recognize that this person is known for this, you know. So it's really to accelerate the process.
Absolutely. And I'm conscious also of the fact that different universities have different strengths. Yeah. So I'm interested in what's informed the choice of Birmingham University in particular. Why not Warwick, just up the road?
Well, because we've actually been working with Birmingham for over 10 years. And it's been more in the area of medicine. Then we've had split sides PhDs of our lecturers in Birmingham, and it's been a great relationship. I mean, there are relationships you're in and it feels equitable.
Sure.
So we've had that kind of respectful relationship. So that's why.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what structural reforms would, in your opinion, from where you sit as Vice-Chancellor, would immediately strengthen Nigerian universities? 2-3 reforms today.
The first one will be the governance. I believe we should have a Ministry of Higher Education, separate from just the Ministry of Education, because the requirements for the higher education is really different. And it should be run by people who understand the sector. You could say we could transition the NUC. The NUC would need reform because it's an oversight or a support, not to take on the functions of the university. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at. The second one will be our funding mechanisms. And the third will be the nature of our governing councils.
Right.
Presently, there's too much political influence in our governing councils. We need to restructure the governing councils. I will say there isn't much wrong with our laws and our acts. It's really that we should follow them, and we should ensure that the governing councils are well, the kind of people we bring on into the council have an understanding and a vision of where universities should be going. Now, when I say that, I'm not speaking to a particular council. I'm just looking at the whole landscape. So you could be lucky and have a good governing council. But many are not. Many are not. And because they've become almost like where you reward political appointed, and that's not good for the university system. So the laws that we have already separate us from the civil service. So we don't need to change them, but we need to implement them. But if we're to do those reforms, is that there must be a way that universities are funded better. We will have to pay fees, tuition fees. What I think needs to come in is for government to find more ways of support. So we have the NEL fund now. That's a step in the right direction. Then you could have scholarships for smart students. Then you could have bursaries from states for their students in certain discipline, in the university. We can have, the NEL fund takes care of those who can't afford, but it takes care of anybody really if you apply, but it's a loan. So we can also have bursaries that you're not paying back. And I do not see why the private sector is not part of this in funding maybe students that are coming with a high grade in areas they're interested in. So we need to have many ways that students are funded, but we also need to have more ways in which research is funded. So when I say funding, it really covers a lot of areas. A percentage must go into research. We must have institutions like the National Institute of Health, where you determine, and that's where the academies come in, where you determine what are the challenges of the country. Where do we want to be in 10 years? So what questions, they should be asking the questions they give to researchers to research. Not that every individual researcher is researching anything that takes their fancies. So I think that kind of reform in which we bring in government money, the academies, and there are many, they're in the humanities, they're in the engineering, they're in health, to help to determine where the country will go, what we need to grow is one. Is a major part of, so that you know what you're funding and how to fund it. So then the governing council, so that they can do the job better.
Absolutely. Professor Ogunsola, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos, can I ask you,
Yes,
therefore, at this point, looking ahead 10 years from now, what absolutely must change for the University of Lagos to take its place, to stand confidently amongst globally competitive high institutions worldwide?
First of all, we must charge tuition fees. And I'll tell you why. If you pay me money for your school fees, you won't take rubbish from me. It is our autonomy, actually, and it's actually fundamental to our autonomy. We must be autonomous. We must be allowed to employ those who are the best. We must go back to our meritocracy, because a lot of that meritocracy being interfered with is coming from outside. And if you cannot have meritocracy when you can't pay well, the good people won't stay. We already have the things we need to do. We can't. Not because we don't know what to do. So they don't need to change. But we must have more freedom to do them. We must make sure that autonomy, when I say autonomy, I'm just giving you some examples, that the incursion of the civil service into the universities has to be stopped. Totally. So that's one thing that must change. The funding, because it affects our autonomy. So it's really the autonomy. We must be really autonomous. And it takes that for us to be. Because for as long as government is funding us to the extent that they are, it will be very difficult for us to be autonomous. Very difficult. I believe that as part of not just Unilag, though, is also that vision for where we want to be as a country, to see how universities are part of. We all talk about the triple helix. It's just now a buzzword, but we're not doing anything about it. So what's the other thing that must change? The way universities, our focus on students, we must become more student-centered in terms of shifting our minds from teaching to learning. There's a big thing around teaching. We are teaching them. then the outcome for that is how many did you teach? But to learning then interrogates you in a different way and means you cannot be complacent and that no student falls behind. And the last thing is that we must have more integration with African universities. There must be more movement between us in terms of collaboration, staffing, and so on. We're not, and students, that migration needs to occur. Not just Africa. We need to open up more. And for us to do that, again, comes down to our autonomy and our funding.
So what does institutional maturity look like for you, therefore, in measurable terms?
Institutional maturity in measurable terms means that we have a strong postgraduate program where we are actually creating new knowledge. We have a strong sense of patency, not patency, in terms of our value addition to community. That meritocracy is at the heart of what we do with much less political interference. A change in the ratio of our students where we have more postgrads than undergrads is something that I think will really speak to our maturity, including all the trappings that come with postgrads and so on. And where as a university we are known for solving the problems that are indigenous, African-based contextual problems. And again, that comes to our strong postgraduate. And finally, an institution that really can personalize learning so that students that have all the resources for any kind of student to be his best self. That for me will be institutional maturity. There's all the systems in place to do that.
So these are all features that are suggestive of an institution with a strengthened governance spine.
Oh yeah.
So therefore, if Nigerian institutions fail to strengthen that governance spine, what do you think are the long-term consequences for the country?
We will never solve Nigeria's problems. We will be struggling. We'll remain a consumer nation, not a nation that grows. Our youth will have a lot of youths that are on the streets unemployable and not able to fit in. And on the long run, we will have a country that may not, I don't want to use the word ungovernable, because we have a lot of young people. We must take them off the streets. We must make them employable or that they can create jobs. They have to feel the worth, and the universities and tertiary system will do that. But if we don't have anything, we have half-baked people all over the place. They're trained. They have should I use the word, I say that in inverted commas, the arrogance of those who have been trained without the depth of training required. So we have people spouting a lot of stuff, and we will never have good governance. Never. Because they haven't been trained to interrogate deeply anything. So if we don't, our universities will lack merit. We will be shunned. Other countries will take over as being great. Right now, Nigeria is doing not too badly, even within Africa, but we could do better. But right now, the trajectory is up. But if we continue to have the kind of interference up and down, it's not good for the country. It's not just about the universities, but you're going to have a lot of people not well trained. And then for the middle class and elites, all your children will remain abroad, and old age will be a problem. We can't have that.
Indeed. And personally, what does success look like for your tenure as Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos?
You know, I've thought about that quite a bit because I think my greatest, and one of them is that I think would be the best, is abstract. And I think I'm seeing it happen, which we must, it'll be to put good systems in place to allow us to grow. It's to have mindset change, and we're working on that. And when I say mindset change, when I came in, as I said, the morale was low, we didn't care. I'm beginning to see a change. And the other change was, it was easier to just teach than do research because there wasn't money. We're beginning to see a greater interest in research. So what would be my area of, if I said things were, success? But I would have, before I go to things like, I would talk about that. I would have created a culture of us more interested in research than in training. And that's beginning to happen. That Unilab will be digitally transformed, which we're already doing, because that's so fundamental to a lot of the transformation we want to do in the future. And 3, that our university will be known globally, in Nigeria and globally, for what we're doing with the young people in terms of, entrepreneurship and nation building. When I use that, I'm saying it very broadly. We're focused on the value addition as a means to nation building. So we want to be known for being an entrepreneurial university, not to be known as an innovative university in all aspects. So that would be success for me. And the last one will be where, any kind of mind or gender is at peace, where we can get rid of all the challenges of our culture and minds are actually, they have a safe space to speak their minds and grow and think. Yeah.
Folasade Ogunsola, thank you for joining us on One-to-One.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
A real pleasure. My word.